Welcome back everyone to a new part of our hero Yuki's story. The last time we saw him, he and his friends were caught in a deadly battle, and of course they managed to win in the end. After all, they're the heroes. And now, let's begin part 2. Specifically, after the battle with the phantom copy, everyone's lives finally returned to the normal, peaceful routine they had grown used to. And although the guild's small house was old and somewhat worn down, it held countless memories within its walls. Beautiful memories that had brought the members of the team together. Memories always filled with warmth and familiarity. Before that, Coral had received a very special mission from Sister Karen, the guild master. The mission was to search for the tear of the sea, an extremely rare and legendary type of spice. And of course, as usual, our short-tempered cat carrier refused to take part in the mission from the very beginning. But where exactly was she supposed to run? Especially when Google had more enthusiasm than he knew what to do with and was practically one step away from picking her up and dragging her along by force. And sure enough, he managed to drag her with him, and from there, the group's journey began once again. While they were traveling, they came across 2 dogs that looked incredibly stupid and mischievous. Suddenly, Yuki, who had known them for a long time, walked toward them to greet them while wearing an extremely serious expression, filled with confidence and determination, almost as if she had decided with every ounce of strength she had that she was going to befriend them and become their friend. The 2 little dogs slowly began moving closer to her, and at that moment, they spotted Rocky, the youngest member of the group. It was very obvious that he had grown, changed, and become more mature than before, which made every member of the group extremely happy to see him like that. The scene was incredibly sweet, filled with emotion and warmth. 1, 2, dogs. Everyone was happy, and the entire atmosphere was overflowing with love and friendship, until Rocky was suddenly bitten, grabbed by the 2 dogs, and dragged away. Everyone just stood there frozen in place, staring at one another in complete shock with absolutely no idea what had just happened. Seriously, countries may change, customs may change, but stupidity is hard to change. Poor Rocky has been getting bitten by these 2 ever since Season 1, and now even in Season 2, the same thing is still happening to him. Good grief, is this kid ever going to catch a break from them or what? Eventually, the group reached the seaside area, where they found themselves standing before an absolutely breathtaking and beautiful sight. There was an entire forest of coral reefs, so mesmerizing that anyone could stand there staring at it without ever getting bored. On top of that, flocks of flying fish were soaring through the sky, circling the area in a way that looked strange and beautiful at the same time. The place was completely different from anything they had ever seen before. After wandering around the area for a while and taking in the scenery surrounding them, a small problem came up. The group got lost. As for little Kara, she was so hungry that she kept screaming and yelling from hunger and would not stop at all. When the girls saw her in that condition, they decided to go look for some meat so they could bring her something to eat and save her from the hunger that was practically killing her. But the moment they turned away, left, and then looked back behind them, they found Yuzuki caught in yet another problem. The 2 stupid dogs had grabbed him, were biting him, and were dragging him away, as if he had practically become their newest prey. At that point, she looked at the 2 dogs and thought to herself that maybe she could slaughter them and turn them into a few dishes for dinner or something, as though they had suddenly become a ready-made meal sitting right in front of her. The moment the 2 animals saw that, they took off running at full speed to save themselves. And honestly, the one who knows how to react in a dangerous situation is the one who survives. Those 2 little dogs clearly understood how the world worked pretty quickly and realized there was absolutely no point in staying there, so the best move was to retreat before they ended up becoming dinner. Then, all of a sudden, Rocky came up with an incredibly bold idea. The man decided to use himself as bait in order to catch an animal, and sure enough, after a short while, a strange creature fell into the trap he had set. After that, she took the creature's heart and used it as food, and the entire group sat down together to eat and enjoy the meal. But while they were still eating, a group of animals suddenly appeared. These animals had not come to greet them or get acquainted with them. No, they had come for revenge, and they intended to kill them. The reason was that this group had eaten members of their own kind. The group was about to get up and enter into battle with the ferocious animals, but before they could do anything, one after another, they collapsed unconscious. The reason they passed out was once again because of their habit of eating anything they saw without stopping to think about whether it was actually safe to eat or not. In other words, they randomly ate anything and everything, and in the end, their bodies were the ones that paid the price. In the middle of all this, while the group was in danger, a mysterious man suddenly appeared and managed to help them escape the situation without any of them being harmed. When he learned that the kitchen group was searching for the tear of the sea, he began telling them about it and explaining what it really was. It turned out that the tear of the sea was actually the tears of Turtle Island, and those tears were shed whenever the turtle laid its eggs. Once they learned that information, the mysterious man took it upon himself to lead the group to the place where they would be able to find the tear of the sea. After following him and reaching the location, they eventually found an enormous tree trunk. At that moment, everyone believed the mission was nearly over, that they had managed to reach the required place without any problems, and that the mission would end successfully. Unfortunately, things were not over yet. Suddenly, 3 strange spirits appeared and began attacking them, and from there, it started to become clear that the appearance of those spirits might have actually been the mysterious man's true objective when he led the group to that place. During the fight against the spirits, Coral began noticing that they seemed extremely familiar to her, almost as if she knew them or had seen them somewhere before. In the middle of the battle, with Yuki encouraging her and helping her gather her strength, rays of warm, brilliant golden light began radiating from her. The light moved toward the spirits, which were filled with anger and resentment, and gradually began restoring them to their true forms. It seemed that Coral's power had never been meant to destroy the spirits. Quite the opposite. Her power was able to calm the anger and hatred inside them and ease the negative emotions that had been controlling them. In the end, the spirits were finally able to break free from what had been happening to them and return to their true forms. Even the old man who had been guiding the group was freed as well, and that was when the truth was finally revealed. It turned out that all 4 of them had originally belonged to the same group, but after being poisoned, they underwent a change and transformed into monsters in that place. The old man who had been guiding them said, "Thank you. Because of you, and with the help of the kitchen group, all of us were finally able to break free." Before disappearing completely, he handed Biko the most important thing he had possessed in his life and said that it would serve as a guide, that it would always remain with them, and that he would continue accompanying the group even if he was no longer directly present beside them. After that, he prayed that the light would guide their path and lead them toward the light of the Buddha's 10 directions. Thanks to Kuro's wind spirit, they finally managed to reach Turtle Island in search of the tear of the sea. There, they waited for half an entire day, sitting around and watching to see whether the turtle would lay its eggs or not, and whether it would even manage to lay a single egg in the first place so they could obtain its tears. In the end, after such a long wait, and dealing with this whole turtle situation, the entire group was completely exhausted and could barely move. So they finally said, "All right, that's enough for now. Let's go back home and rest. And most importantly, let's go eat dinner." After that, Kara went to meet her friend, or her mistress, and began reporting all the latest developments and everything that had happened. The problem was that Kara had participated in the battle against the images, or phantom copies, and that directly violated Her Majesty the Queen's orders, which meant the truth had been exposed. The moment the little girl realized that she had been found out, she began trembling in fear with no idea what to do because she expected the punishment to be extremely severe. But contrary to what she expected, the queen forgave Kororo and did not punish her. Meanwhile, Yuki was taking some ingredients to the tailor shop. But while he was there, the shop owner spotted him, and the moment she saw her chance, she grabbed him and forced him to try on several adorable, cute princess dresses. When the others arrived and saw him, they were absolutely stunned by his strange new appearance. After all, the person they were used to seeing in his ordinary clothes was suddenly standing in front of them, wearing things that looked like adorable princess dresses. So naturally, they were completely shocked by the sight. At that moment, 2 girls appeared. It turned out that those 2 girls were members of a strange group. As for the cat, she returned carrying a huge burden of worry, and her mood had hit rock bottom, especially after everything that had happened. And it did not stop there. Even every member of their guild was wearing flashy, frilly princess dresses that were way too cute for their own good. The sight was so shocking that the little one stood completely frozen in place for about 5 seconds, unable to figure out what to say. But since our cat already has more than enough cuteness and charm of her own, naturally she had to get her own share of the disaster too. She went over to the shop owner, and the moment that woman spotted a fresh victim, she immediately forced her into an extremely decorative and flashy dress. And of course, the embarrassment was so overwhelming that the cat remained painfully shy, her face turning red from embarrassment while she had absolutely no idea how to react or what to do about the disaster this woman had dragged her into. After that, the whole group sat together, talking, laughing, and having an incredibly pleasant time. But while Yuki went to wash his hand, he accidentally ran into some fans of the strange girl group. The moment those fans saw him, they began threatening to kill him. The reason was that, in their eyes, this guy had dared to touch the people they admired, and to them, that was an unforgivable crime. But then, Yuki started talking to them and shared some of his ideas and principles. Strangely enough, what he said was so powerful that these people looked as though they had suddenly snapped back to reality. They understood his words and felt as if they had discovered an entirely new principle and a revolutionary idea about life. In other words, when great ideas meet other great ideas, a miracle happens. In the middle of the dark night, hidden away in a distant corner of town, one of the thieves was walking alone when a mysterious black shadow suddenly appeared and swallowed him completely without leaving behind a single trace. At that time, Carlos and Cora were extremely excited and eagerly waiting for the group's next performance. They wanted to go to the show and enjoy it, but Carlos was unable to go because she had work to do and something she needed to search for, and it seemed that the poor cat had something inside her. She had so many thoughts and emotions bottled up inside her, and she sat there all alone, upset, her entire expression filled with sadness and distraction. While she was sitting there in that state, she encountered one of the girls from the group. The girl was training seriously and diligently in dancing, preparing for the concert that was going to be held the following day. And when the long-awaited day finally arrived, an enormous number of fans showed up to attend the concert. The group began singing about love and the emotions they carried inside them, and through their songs and voices they managed to spread happiness among the people. The sound of the crowd, their cheers, the dancing and the music filled the entire place, as if joy itself had covered a huge part of the sky. Their concert became an incredible success and attracted a massive crowd. But somewhere else, something similar to what had happened with the phantom copies was beginning to happen all over again. There was a group of creatures moving everywhere, collecting human souls one after another. The problem, however, was that these creatures had slipped out of the Queen's control and were no longer following her orders the way they used to. Because of that, the Queen ordered Kara and Christian to go out, eliminate those creatures, and destroy them. As for Kara, she was already completely exhausted that day. It was obvious that she was not only facing an external enemy. In reality, she was fighting a battle against herself from within. She knew that she served the Queen and that she had to carry out Her Majesty's orders no matter what they were. But at the same time, she was also part of the kitchen group. In other words, she was caught right in the middle, unable to choose between her loyalty to the Queen and the people she had come to see as her friends and family. In the middle of the darkness she was drowning in, the warm moonlight slowly began reflecting over her, almost as if it were trying to reassure her and calm her trembling heart. Her body was still shaking from fear and tension, and she could not escape the whirlwind spinning inside her mind. In the end, the entire group managed to pull her out of that state and free her from the endless thoughts and distant days she had been trapped in. They told her that she needed to return home with them, and once again, Yuki was heading to the market with Kuro. Suddenly, something extremely strange caught his attention. There was a strangely shaped piece of wood standing in front of him, and when he looked at it, it felt unbelievably familiar. After a few moments, he realized who it was. It was Oi. Not too long ago, Oi had transferred to one of the best and most famous girls' academies, but because of how painfully shy and introverted she was, she still could not even properly introduce herself to other people, let alone make friends or blend in with the rest of the students. Basically, the girl had entered a brand new school without knowing how to talk to anyone, or even how to begin a friendship with another person. But today, something unexpected happened. One of the most famous and outstanding students at the academy personally asked to meet Oi. Naturally, the request completely threw her off and made her incredibly nervous and confused, because she simply was not used to anyone showing interest in her or asking to meet her. But when the older girl offered to help her, Oi became extremely happy and excited. For the first time, she felt that maybe someone could actually help her overcome her shyness and begin adjusting to this new place. While they were taking a tour through the library, another encounter happened. Boki met Unity, and while everyone was sitting together, talking and laughing in a pleasant atmosphere, two girls entered the place. The first girl had pink hair and an extremely cheerful way of moving, and her name was Cher. The second girl was named Kara. The two girls had come to meet Oi because they wanted to benefit from her knowledge and experience regarding the Forest of Lostness. Recently, strange and unexplained things had started happening inside the forest, along with suspicious incidents that no one could explain. Because of that, the two girls decided to investigate the matter themselves and uncover the truth. And of course, when something this important happens, you have to tell your friends and keep your entire team informed. Right? That was why Yuki returned and brought the two of them along, while also bringing someone else with them. With that, the whole group decided to move together and begin their journey in search of the truth. Maybe they could finally discover what was really happening inside the forest and uncover the secret behind the strange events that had recently appeared there. Sure enough, the moment they entered the forest, they discovered something extremely strange. Mysterious gravestones were scattered throughout the area. As they moved deeper into the forest, the fog gradually became thicker and thicker until it grew incredibly dense, covering everything around them. It even swallowed up the path they were walking on, to the point where they could no longer see what was ahead or even tell where they were going. Fortunately, Ronnie had a stone that could determine the correct path and help them figure out their location, allowing them to keep track of where they were and avoid getting lost too easily. They continued walking while talking with one another, completely absorbed in their conversation, until they suddenly discovered something terrifying. They had returned to the exact same area with the mysterious gravestones they had seen only a short while earlier. Ronnie was extremely confused, so she pulled out the stone and asked it where they were, trying to confirm their exact location. But instead of giving her a normal answer, the stone began producing strange and terrifying noises, as if it were genuinely haunted or had something demonic trapped inside it. The entire group panicked, and when they began running in every direction trying to escape, they found something far worse waiting in front of them. Terrifying ghosts appeared and blocked their path. The ghosts stood directly in front of them in a horrifying way, leaving them absolutely nowhere to pass through. The group kept running and trying to escape from them, but after a while, they discovered that they had become separated and lost track of one another. Because of that, they decided to split up and search for the little girl who had disappeared in the middle of all the chaos. While they were searching, a powerful gust of wind suddenly swept through the area, and in just a single instant, Bashiro Yuki disappeared. They vanished right before their eyes without any warning, causing Carmel, who was already afraid of practically everything, to fall into a severe state of panic. The girl was terrified and had no idea what to do, especially after seeing the ghosts and watching her friends disappear right in front of her eyes. But then Oi suddenly appeared, and before anyone could even understand how she had shown up, she struck Charles and knocked her unconscious. That was when the truth was revealed. The monsters and ghosts that had been frightening the group the entire time were never real monsters in the first place. It turned out that they were nothing more than dolls created by Oi herself, and she had been using them to scare people. The reason was that Oi felt lonely. She was incredibly lonely and did not know how to interact with people or make friends. So she created these dolls and made them appear before others so that she would feel like she was not alone. At the same time, however, she was extremely embarrassed and terrified that everyone else might discover the truth, because she knew they might laugh at her or see her differently if they learned that she was the one behind all of this. Then suddenly, something incredibly strange appeared from behind one of the skeletons. The entire scene began to change. Without warning, everything around them became completely covered in flames, destruction, and death. The scenery transformed from a quiet, fog-filled forest into a horrifying place filled with fire and ruin, as though they had entered an entirely different world. At that moment, she understood that the skeleton standing in front of her was trying to send her a message. Suddenly, a powerful light flashed before her eyes, and fragments of the skeleton's broken memories began to appear. Old, scattered memories surfaced one after another, as if they were showing her exactly what had happened to this person before they ended up in this state. Oi calmly moved closer to it, and instead of being afraid or running away, she embraced it. She hugged it from the bottom of her heart, trying to understand the pain trapped inside it and reach it through her sincere emotions, straight from the depths of her heart. With the warmth and sincerity of her feelings, the angry spirit, filled with hatred and pain, gradually began to calm down. It was as though the spirit had finally found someone who understood it, someone who was able to feel the pain it had been carrying inside for all those years. In the end, that person was finally able to let go of the attachment and anger that had been holding them back, abandoning the last thing still tying them to the past. At last, their soul was able to find peace and become free. the spirit completely disappeared. After that, Oi took everyone with her and showed them her strange home. And even though the house and everything that had happened inside it were strange and somewhat frightening, no one blamed Oi or mocked her special friends. Quite the opposite. Everyone accepted her exactly as she was, and no one tried to hurt her feelings or make her feel as though she was somehow different from them. As for Joni, after relying on her research, observations, and all the recordings she had been making, she came up with an extremely strange theory. She said it was possible that everything they had witnessed in the forest was not actually happening in the way they believed. What appeared before them might simply have been some strange phenomenon that allowed them to see or somehow communicate with events taking place in another world. According to her theory, all of these phenomena could be connected to a world completely different from their own. And she firmly believed that someday, at some point in the future, all the secrets of this world would finally be revealed, and every mystery that no one currently understood would eventually receive an explanation. Today, the group was forced to face an extremely ferocious monster. The creature was terrifyingly violent, and the moment it appeared and began attacking them, the entire group was forced to run away at full speed in order to survive. In the middle of their escape, someone was lying unconscious on the ground, so Yuki decided to stop and face the monster by himself in order to protect the others. He raised his sword and stood directly in front of the monster, striking the classic heroic pose of someone about to save everyone. And with that main character aura that was supposedly supposed to let him accomplish the impossible, you would naturally expect him to pull off some amazing move and defeat the monster with a single strike. But before he could even land one attack, the monster hit him first. It smashed him with an incredibly powerful blow that launched him straight into the air, sending him flying upward like a rocket. Even stranger, while he was falling back down, he accidentally landed right on the beak of a gigantic bird that just happened to be passing by. Seriously, what kind of bizarre luck was that? And at that moment, another surprise happened. Suddenly, a sword came flying in from far away at incredible speed, struck the giant bird and successfully brought it down. So Yuki was literally seconds away from being killed by the monster, then ended up falling onto the beak of a gigantic bird, only for someone else to save him in the end. As for the remaining three, the monster was still chasing them, forcing them to run away and hide inside a cave. Luckily for them, a mysterious girl suddenly appeared and easily defeated the ferocious monster that had been pursuing the three of them, saving their lives. After taking care of the monster and rescuing them, she wanted to prove that she had not come there as their enemy, so she decided to personally cook dinner for them. But this was not just any dinner. It turned out that she cooked using her own secret recipe, an incredibly special recipe that was completely one of a kind. When the three of them tasted the food, they were stunned by the flavor and by her cooking skills. They could hardly believe that this girl had managed to prepare a meal of such incredible quality, and the three they had gotten to know? It turned out that these people were originally members of the guild, and they had come to this area to investigate the shadow that had appeared in the forest. The girl offered to help them with the investigation. Naturally, the group was extremely excited about her offer, and they began searching for the shadow together. They spent nearly half the day searching, combing through the forest area by area, but no matter how hard they looked, they could not find a single trace of it. They did not even catch sight of its shadow moving around the forest. But suddenly, one of them was attacked by a monster, and the moment the rest of the group saw what had happened, they rushed toward her immediately to help and eliminate the monsters. Within seconds, the entire area descended into complete chaos, with everyone trying to fight the monsters while avoiding their attacks at the same time. In the middle of the battle, at just the right moment, she managed to summon Kasumi's power and used it to save herself from the danger she was in. At the same time, an extremely strange shadow appeared. Once light was cast on it and its form was revealed, they discovered that it looked exactly like Kasumi. In other words, its appearance was almost identical to hers. Because of that, the group decided to name this shadow Kiri. But the surprising thing was that Kiri was not aggressive at all. Quite the opposite. She was a very sweet, adorable little girl, with absolutely no sign that she hated them or intended to attack them. In other words, the shadow they had believed to be a dangerous monster turned out to be a small, gentle creature that did not seem to want to hurt any of them. She was completely different from the other shadows, and that made investigator Kasumi extremely curious about the reason why. She kept asking herself why this shadow was so different from the others and what made her non-aggressive unlike them. Then she suddenly noticed something extremely important. It seemed that Yuki's power might actually be capable of calming the anger of the shadows that had been chasing human souls and trying to absorb them. But at that very moment, the number of shadows began increasing more and more, One after another, they appeared from every direction and started rushing toward the group and attacking them. In the middle of all this chaos, an enormous golem appeared, and the situation suddenly became far more dangerous. While the group stood there discussing what they should do, an incredibly beautiful butterfly suddenly appeared. The butterfly began changing right before their eyes and gradually transformed into a girl. She introduced herself and said her name was Mitahomel. Then she explained the truth to them. She told them that her real body was hidden inside a golem, and that the shadows were trying to seize her body and take it for themselves. Because of that, she asked the group to help her and eliminate the swarm of shadows that was trying to reach her body. Unfortunately, they were almost too late. The golem had already been attacked, and the shadows had managed to swallow it. That caused Mitahomel to warn the group about an even greater danger that was coming. She told them the shadows would not stop there. They intended to attack the village, absorb the souls of all its residents, and drain their energy until their very last breath. Because of that, she suggested that the group evacuate the villagers and get everyone out before the attack began. The problem was that this was almost impossible because there were not enough boats to transport everyone, so the group decided to make an even harder and more courageous choice. Instead of running away, they would fight. They decided to defeat the monsters and protect every single villager, no matter the cost. They also had one main objective they needed to accomplish first, and that was freeing Meta. Because Meta was not just an ordinary girl, she was one of the legendary 7 kings. After Yuki unleashed his power, the entire group charged forward and began attacking him with everything they had. At first, it looked as though they were extremely close to succeeding, and everything seemed to be going in their favor. But suddenly, a powerful black shadow appeared and struck them violently, sending them flying far away from the area. Meanwhile, she continued using a technique called mana, the power connected to the false princess. Back in the village, Kiris was being attacked by a group of monsters. The situation looked extremely dangerous, but fortunately, Yuki appeared just in time. He arrived quickly and managed to save her from danger. The moment he grabbed Kiris's hand, something extremely strange happened. A fragment of distant and unknown memories suddenly appeared before him, and in that memory, he saw that he had met Amirk before. She was the one who explained the truth to him. She told him that the shadows were basically like errors or glitches existing in this world, and that they were supposed to have been eliminated and destroyed a long time ago. But for some reason, someone had appeared who deliberately decided to exploit the shadows and use them for evil and malicious purposes. Even though Yuki really did manage to save Kiris and get her out of danger, one thing was extremely clear. The shadows were specifically targeting Kiris. That meant the attack on her was not just a coincidence, and it was obvious that there was a much bigger reason behind why she was being targeted, one that had not yet been revealed. They took advantage of that fact and decided to lure the group of monsters all the way to the lake, away from the village, so they could keep the danger away from its people. Yuki's group's plan was working extremely well, and almost everything was going exactly as they had planned. But suddenly, Kiri collapsed to the ground. Her body began gradually disappearing, as if she were evaporating right before their eyes. And at the same time, strange memories from another world began flooding into her mind and appearing in front of her, one after another. Even though Yuki kept pushing himself and using every bit of his power to save her, doing so placed him in an extremely dangerous situation as well. His power began running out, and his body could no longer endure much more. It was obvious that he was close to completely losing the ability to resist. But at the very last moment, fortunately, Flavir appeared and managed to save the situation, helping them before things spiraled completely out of control. But despite everything they tried, Kiri disappeared in the end. The reason was that 2 completely identical versions of the same person could not exist in a single world. Just like a computer or a single folder cannot contain 2 files with exactly the same name and identical data. That meant the existence of 2 versions of the same person in the same world was impossible, and one of them had to disappear. Kiri's disappearance hurt the group deeply, and every one of them was affected by what happened. But there was no time to grieve because the battle was still going on. They had to keep fighting, especially since the ferocious monsters were getting closer and closer to the village and had no intention of leaving its people alone. At the same time, memories from another world appeared. In that world, the 2 of them had once been on the same team, and there had been an incredibly strong bond between them. But as time passed, the bond connecting them was shattered and destroyed, and each of them went down a different path. Even though Yuki was willing to sacrifice himself to save and protect her, in the end, he chose to rebuild the bond between them once again, while also restoring his connection with the other 3. Even if the road was filled with danger, and even if the situation seemed completely hopeless, Yuki was determined to succeed this time. He wanted to prove that he could protect everyone no matter what happened and no matter what price he had to pay. Meanwhile, Mana continued launching her attacks without giving them even a moment to catch their breath. She was clearly enjoying seeing the fear written across Viko's face. It was obvious that she was taking pleasure in Viko's fear, as if seeing her terrified was entertaining to her. Without anyone noticing, the shadows had spread across the entire area and had nearly covered the whole level. But Viko did not give up. Despite the fear controlling her, she managed to draw out an enormous amount of power from within herself and stood against Mana. She declared that she would return and reclaim everything that had once belonged to her, and that she would never allow anyone to take anything from her ever again. And in the middle of all of this, she still held on to one tiny hope. She wished that someday she could sit at the same table with Mana and share a warm, real meal with her. She believed that even if they simply sat together and ate, they might be able to understand each other a little better, even if only by the smallest amount. Maybe if they talked and sat beside each other, they could finally understand one another's feelings instead of continuing to see each other only as enemies. But before any of that could happen, Mang used her ability and moved away from the area, taking Viko with her and returning her toward the group. The reason was that the time had not come yet. Mana did not want to see Viko strong and holding herself together like this. She wanted to see her at the absolute peak of despair and collapse, not standing there now, resisting and declaring that she would take back everything that had been stolen from her. Because of that, instead of facing her at that moment, she vanished with her and returned her to the group. At the same time, the monsters and the golem were still there and had begun moving again. As for our heroine, she did not waste any time. She quickly prepared herself for another confrontation, and using Marco's power belonging to the little princess, she charged toward the monster with all her strength like an arrow flying at tremendous speed, filled with light and brilliance. And sure enough, she managed to strike the monster and finish it off. After the battle, everyone was extremely worried about her. They kept searching for her and running after her to make sure she was all right. Fortunately, the little girl was still fine and had not been hurt. She tried to act as though she did not care and was holding herself together as if nothing had happened. But without even realizing it, tears had already begun falling from her eyes. At that moment, the girl walked over to her and pulled the little cat into her arms, continuing to reassure and comfort her. Recently, something terrifying and strange had appeared in the town. This thing had been attacking the townspeople and causing them fear and trouble, so the group decided to accept the mission. The objective was clear. They had to protect the people and make sure everyone could live their lives and enjoy a peaceful meal without being afraid that some monster might suddenly appear. In another part of the town, there was a group of people working as hard as they possibly could and trying to make money by any means necessary. The reason was that there was something specific they could make money from, and that was this slimy substance. So the group decided to go and search for it themselves. After searching and digging, they discovered that they had not merely found a small amount of it. It turned out to be an entire mine. There was an enormous amount of the slimy substance, so much that they became incredibly excited and thought they had finally discovered a treasure. But their happiness did not last long, because the substance suddenly swallowed the entire group. It was as if the whole thing had been a trap from the very beginning, and everyone who had gone inside searching, as soon as they reached it, they found themselves inside its stomach instead of coming out with money in their hands. In the middle of all that chaos, there was a poor young man standing on the road, and even he had no idea what was going to happen to him. As for Kuro, that day she happened to run into the mysterious person who had saved her before. But when she saw that person, she noticed that they were injured. Without hesitation, the little girl used her healing magic and began treating the wounds and helping them. While the two of them were there, they suddenly heard the sounds of chaos and battle coming from far away. When they looked toward the source of the noise, they discovered that the Royal Guard Knights were locked in a fierce battle against a massive iron suit of armor. The knights believed that this iron armor was their commander, so they did not dare strike or attack it. Fortunately for them, the real commander appeared at exactly the right moment, and the surprising part was that the real commander was not some stranger. It was the very same mysterious person they had met before. The moment the commander appeared, it was as if a heavy stone had suddenly been lifted from their hearts. Their hesitation and fear disappeared, and they all charged toward the iron armor, unleashing powerful, direct attacks until they finally managed to destroy it and take it down. Everyone thought that was it and that the battle was finally over. But unfortunately, the disaster was not over yet. Suddenly, the enormous monster appeared, and it turned out that the members of the naive group and the poor young man it had swallowed earlier were all trapped inside it. In other words, the monster was literally hiding all of those people inside its body. Fortunately, thanks to Kuro's wind spirit, they managed to locate them, pull them out of the monster, and rescue them. Once they made sure their friends were safe, Kuro charged at the monster with all her strength and delivered one powerful, decisive blow. That single attack was enough to finish the monster completely. After the battle ended, everything around them finally returned to normal. The entire group went back to laughing and talking together, then began cleaning up the battlefield, organizing the destruction that had been left behind, and trying to restore the place to something close to its original condition. After a long day filled with fighting and trouble, night finally arrived. At that time, Monica delivered a report on the latest developments in the investigations taking place in Rosa City, but it was obvious that things still were not proceeding normally. The people there were kind and wonderful in the way they treated her, and that affected her deeply. In the end, they won her heart and made her grow attached to both the place and the people living there. After a long and exhausting day of harvesting rice, the entire group had completely drained their energy, and every one of them felt as though they could barely move their bodies from sheer exhaustion. They headed back toward home absolutely starving, their stomachs growling loudly, and the only thing on their minds was getting there as quickly as possible and eating anything they could find. But while they were walking along the road, another disaster struck Yuki. A strange object suddenly attacked him, and after taking a closer look, they realized that the attacker was neither a monster nor some terrifying creature. It was actually two tiny, incredibly cute girls. The energetic girl, whose entire appearance radiated liveliness, introduced herself and said her name was Ayana. With her was her small, chubby friend named Wiki. As for the other girl, she was extremely quiet and shy, and her name was Kuromi. These two little girls lived in an orphanage under the care of Mrs. Sarin. That day they were planning to enter the forest to search for honey because they wanted to bring it back as a gift for their mother. When the group heard their story, they decided to help them, escort them, and return with them. Sure enough, while they were heading back along the road, they encountered a girl named Shika. But there was something very strange about her appearance. She looked exhausted, pale, and visibly weak. It also seemed that she had lost a large portion of her memories, almost as if she could not remember anything about herself or what had happened to her. After that, they returned to Aroka so they could head to the restaurant and get some rest. As for Yuki, he brought Nozomi with him, and it was extremely obvious that he was worried about her and uneasy about her condition. But the moment they entered the restaurant, something strange began to happen. Suddenly, the entire place started filling with terrifying, bizarre laughter. The laughter came from every direction, and within moments, the atmosphere transformed from an ordinary place into something genuinely frightening. Then, all of a sudden, Kuromi seemed to completely lose control of herself. The quiet, shy little girl they knew transformed into a completely different person and began yelling, cursing, attacking people, and hitting them without even knowing what she was doing. It was extremely shocking, especially because none of her behavior resembled her at all. At the same time, Shika began regaining consciousness. But strangely enough, the moment she woke up, she too seemed like an entirely different person. The whole place descended into chaos, and no one understood what was happening or how these girls had suddenly changed so dramatically. In the middle of all this confusion, Angelia began noticing something extremely strange about Shika's appearance. She kept staring at her for a while, then discovered that her appearance and behavior were somehow connected to her little teddy bear, Bakita. At first, this truth was incredibly difficult for everyone to believe. How could Shida possibly be connected to that little teddy bear in such a way? And what did the teddy bear have to do with everything that was happening? But after a short while, Shika's true consciousness returned, and she was finally able to speak and explain the truth to them. She told them that all the strange phenomena they had witnessed were caused by Flori, the spirit of memories. This spirit was connected to memories, and it was responsible for the strange changes affecting the girls, almost as if it were playing around with their memories and consciousness. Originally, Shika had intended to use Flori's power to help our heroine recover her lost memories, but the problem was that everything had completely slipped out of her control. The spirit became far stronger than expected, and what had started as a simple attempt to help turned into a dangerous problem that could hurt everyone. Because of that, Shika asked the group to help her seal Flori's spirit and bring it under control before the situation became even worse. The group agreed, and they all decided to head with her toward the lake, because there was a place there they could use to seal the spirit, and so they began their journey toward the lake. But as usual, the journey was not going to pass without problems. Along the way, the cat accidentally injured her leg, forcing the group to stop for a while and help her. Afterward, they reached a small gate and decided to pass through it together. The moment they crossed the gate, they found themselves standing in the middle of a massive field filled with beautiful white flowers. The scenery was so peaceful and beautiful that it could make anyone forget every problem and battle they had ever gone through. As she walked through the field, she began thinking about the scenery around her and told herself that if they could continue living like this forever, surrounded by this kind of peace and tranquility, it would be something truly beautiful. Eventually, after a long journey, the two of them reached the place they had been heading toward. But the moment they arrived, they accidentally discovered something extremely strange. There was a mysterious object beneath the crystal clear waters of the lake, while at the same time, back at the restaurant, everything was still turned upside down and filled with chaos. While that strange object was very close to them, a beam of light suddenly pierced through the window. The instant the light appeared, Adon's little teddy bear rushed outside at full speed. It turned out that the teddy bear was actually connected to a certain spirit, and that spirit appeared before them. Without wasting any time, Ichika charged toward the spirit, delivered a powerful strike, and managed to slice it in half. But surprisingly, the physical attack did absolutely nothing. The spirit was completely unaffected by the blow, as if a sword or any ordinary physical attack had no effect on it whatsoever. While everyone was distracted and not paying attention, the spirit began attacking again. When our heroine saw that her friend was in danger, she did not hesitate for even a second. She rushed toward the attack and stood in front of her friend, protecting her and taking the blow in her place. At that moment, something extremely strange happened. Suddenly an old memory surged into our heroine's mind. She began seeing an image of three incredibly beautiful girls standing before her, as though they had known one another for a very long time and shared a strong bond. She saw the three of them agreeing to go together to the top of the tower. The memory was painfully vivid, as if it had been buried deep inside her for years, and had suddenly begun resurfacing. Without even realizing it, tears started falling from our heroine's eyes. But after a few moments, she returned to reality, thanks to the source of power inside her, which helped her regain consciousness and break free from the memory. At that moment, Ichika began singing in an incredibly pure and gentle voice. Her voice managed to restrain the spirit and paralyze its movements, as though the song itself had become a weapon against it. Taking advantage of that opportunity, the group decided to end the situation once and for all. They agreed to seal the spirit instead of continuing to fight it, and in the end, they successfully managed to seal it. The next day, Picasso continued her usual routine of harvesting rice, while Kuro went into town because she had several letters she needed to send. But the moment she reached the shop, a problem occurred. Suddenly, a group of thieves appeared and stormed the place. The thieves took all the money they had and also stole Kuro's letters. Naturally, Kuro was not about to let her belongings disappear that easily, so she decided that she had to recover her letters no matter what. At the same time, she discovered that two other girls had also had their letters stolen, so she decided to work together with them to recover everything. The two girls were named Misaki-sana, and both of them were students at Closen Academy. Unfortunately, their school was on the verge of shutting down, and honestly, the reason was disastrous. The two of them were doing so poorly in their studies that their academic performance had started affecting the reputation and overall standing of the entire school. So, in order to avoid becoming the reason their entire school suffered because of them, they eventually decided to submit recommendation letters and transfer to another school. But the problem was that those exact letters had been stolen by the thieves. That meant they had no choice but to go to the gang's hideout and recover the letters by any means necessary. Sure enough, they reached the gang's hideout, and there Misaki decided to use an extremely bold plan. She said she would use magic of beauty and seduction to trick the thieves, make them fall into her hands, and then recover the letters. The problem was that the way she carried out the plan was a little different from what anyone had expected. The girl began making incredibly strange movements and acting completely crazy in front of the thieves, hoping she would somehow be able to control them. But just as expected, the plan failed spectacularly. The thieves grabbed her, tied her up, threw her into the storage room, and locked her inside. As for Yuki, he was still deeply preoccupied with the memories he had seen the previous day. The images that had appeared before him refused to leave his mind. He sat alone, troubled and lost in thought, unable to understand the meaning behind what he had seen. And while he was sitting there in that state, suddenly, someone appeared before her, and at that moment she remembered that there had once been a time when she had wonderful teammates and friends she was deeply connected to. Unfortunately, back then, she had been unable to protect them, and that had left her with an overwhelming sense of helplessness, as though she had failed at the most important thing she ever wanted to do. She felt that no matter how strong she was, in the end, she still had not been able to save the people who mattered most to her. But this time, she was determined about one thing. This time, she had to protect everyone, and no matter what happened, she would never allow the same tragedy to happen again. And the bond between the members of their arts group would not be broken. No matter what problems or dangers came their way, she would never allow anything to tear them apart. Back with the letter rescue group, while they were trying to save their friend, something strange happened. When their friend was bitten by a dog, Sana suddenly burst into hysterical laughter and seemed extremely happy about what had happened. At that moment, thanks to Coral's purification spell, they were able to use an incredibly foul-smelling purple mass to distract the thieves and drive them away from the area. The smell was so disgusting that the thieves became completely confused and had no idea what to do, giving the group the perfect opportunity. Sure enough, they took advantage of it and managed to rescue Misaki while also recovering the letters that had been stolen from them. But while they were trying to escape, another problem came up. The thieves discovered their location. They began chasing them, putting the group in an extremely dangerous situation, and it looked as though the thieves were just about to catch them. But at exactly the right moment, the girl's teacher arrived with a group of Royal Guard knights. The knights quickly arrested all the thieves, rescued the group, and got them out of the dangerous situation they were trapped in. After that, Kuro was finally able to send her letters. As for Sana and Misaki, they made a different decision. The two of them decided to tear up the recommendation letters they had planned to use to transfer to another school. Instead of running away from the problem, they chose to face it. They promised themselves that starting today, they would study seriously, improve their grades and academic performance, and never allow themselves to remain a source of disappointment for their school or their school. Their goal was to prove to themselves and to the school that they truly could change. At the same time, Kuro and her friend went to help Mirko with the rice harvest. But the moment they arrived and saw the land, they were shocked. The farmland was unbelievably huge. The girl kept staring at the place and complaining, saying she had absolutely no idea when they would ever finish harvesting all of it. It was obvious that if they worked alone, they might still be there until next year. But then, at that moment, a wonderful surprise happened. Suddenly, all of their friends began showing up one after another. Everyone they knew came to help them harvest the rice. And the reason was the letter Kuro had sent. The letter reached their friends, and once they learned that the group needed help, every one of them decided to come and stand by their side. And so, they all worked together, harvesting rice, talking, and laughing, while the entire atmosphere transformed from exhausting hard labor into a beautiful time filled with friendship and laughter. Thanks to everyone working together, the shiny white grains of rice finally began piling up in front of them, and they completed the task that had seemed impossible at first. Once they were done, they all sat together, made rice balls, and started eating and enjoying the result they had worked so hard to achieve. They sat there eating together, each one of them feeling proud and happy because they realized that when they worked together, they could accomplish great things no matter how difficult they seemed. At that moment, Kuro began to cry, but this time, her tears were not because of sadness or fear. They were tears of joy and happiness. That moment made her come to an incredibly important decision. She decided that she had to tell Yuki the truth. They needed to know that she was actually the princess. The next morning, she gathered all of her courage and went toward them. She wanted to tell them the truth, and she knew she had to confront the situation instead of continuing to hide her secret. She stood in front of the door, took a breath, and tried to begin speaking. But the moment the words reached the edge of her lips, she could not say them. Fear and anxiety took control of her, and she remained standing there, not knowing what to do. She was extremely nervous, and every passing second made her feel that she had to speak, but the words simply refused to come out. In the end, everyone left while she still had not managed to tell them the truth. The secret remained inside her as she stood there, unable to figure out how to begin or how to tell them that she was not just an ordinary girl. That same day, Kara made rice balls herself and took them to offer to the queen. Even though she did not feel well, she remained sitting beside her friend and mistress until exhaustion overcame her and she fell asleep without realizing it. But the moment she woke up, she was shocked to find herself drawn into a confrontation with the Star King. In an instant, the queen took her and transported her into a special spatial dimension that she had created herself so she could fight the battle away from everyone else. And there, an incredibly fierce confrontation began between two of the 7 kings. The queen decided she would face her opponent alone, determined to end the battle herself and put an end to everything. She began using teleportation magic, moving her opponent between different spaces and dimensions, and every time she appeared in a new location, she unleashed deadly attacks one after another. But despite how powerful those attacks were, they were avoided with ease. Every strike passed right beside her without touching her, almost as though she already knew where the attack would come from before it even happened. At that point, the queen decided to raise the level of the battle. She summoned her own special power and also began using the power of one of the 7 kings. Meta. The power that appeared was so enormous that she was forced to use all of her energy just to block the attacks. Every strike caused incredibly powerful explosions, and its destructive force was terrifying. But after a while she began retreating and pulling herself out of the confrontation, almost as if she were preparing another move. Sure enough, she returned to the attack once again, and that was when the truth began to show. Despite being extremely powerful, it was obvious that she was no true match for the Star Queen. The queen noticed something extremely important during the fight. From the beginning of the battle until the end, she had been relying almost entirely on Meta's power and had not been using her true power at all. That made the queen begin to suspect that she might be like Yuki, meaning she may have lost a large portion of her strength because of what had happened to her before. She had also used an enormous number of skills throughout the battle, causing her magical reserves to drop rapidly until she had nearly exhausted all of her magical energy. At that moment, the queen took advantage of the fact that her comrades were trying to keep the shadows occupied and prevent him from interfering. She charged toward him at terrifying speed. She raised her sharp sword and aimed it, preparing to deliver a killing blow, but the plan did not go the way she expected. At the last possible moment, the girl used her ability and teleported Clover in front of her so that she would take the attack instead. The queen was about to strike with her sword, but at the very last second she managed to control the attack and avoid seriously injuring the little girl. And that was when the biggest surprise happened. The real girl finally appeared. It turned out that the queen had been completely deceived from the very beginning of the battle. The person she had been fighting the entire time was not the real Kazir at all. She was merely a copy or manifestation of her. Suddenly, an incredibly sharp sword appeared and pierced through the queen's body. At that same moment, the dimension Yoko had created began gradually collapsing, as though the entire space had been connected to the battle, and the moment that strike landed, everything started breaking apart and falling apart. As for Korra, she stood there watching what had happened in complete shock. The moment she saw the scene, she began screaming and crying from the overwhelming pain and despair. She could not comprehend what had just happened before her eyes, and all she could do was keep crying and calling out to them while feeling as though everything around her was collapsing. Back at the group's headquarters, the situation was no better. There were other people facing an enormous danger as well. Ilia was using all her strength to protect Mega and Shinobu, and she was willing to do anything to protect her children from the danger closing in on them, but they were taken away from the area and disappeared completely. Their disappearance threw every member of the group into a state of intense anxiety, and no one knew what had happened to them or who was behind it. At that time, Mabel arrived at the food group's headquarters and asked them for help. But the moment she explained what had happened, no one could believe what they were hearing, because the person who had attacked Ilia and the two who were with her and who had caused their disappearance was Carrier herself. At that exact moment, the ground and the water began shaking violently. Suddenly, an enormous wall rose out of nowhere around the entire city, like a gigantic siege structure that sealed the city off from every direction. Then Kaiser appeared and announced before everyone that today would be the day of the end. And as if that were not enough, another figure appeared immediately afterward. She used her magic and began transporting the shadows, making them appear everywhere throughout the city. Within moments, the entire city had transformed into a battlefield. And at the same time, the group decided they had to move and head into the city to help the people. Inside the castle, investigator Kasumi and Tamaki were sneaking through the area in an attempt to steal something important. What the two of them were searching for was Rosa's ancient book. In the middle of their search, an extremely important surprise occurred. Yona, who was a genius and noticed even the smallest details, realized that the person in front of them might only be a fake copy. She began suspecting that the real princess might actually be someone they knew extremely well, perhaps even one of the people who had been with them the entire time. In other words, there was a very real possibility that the true princess's identity had been right in front of them from the beginning, but no one had noticed. At that time, the group had finally reached the city. Without wasting a second, they began attacking the shadows one after another and rescuing the people trapped in the streets. But the situation was rapidly getting worse, because Kaiser ordered Carol to attack and kill innocent civilians. It was obvious that they did not simply want to take control of the city. They wanted as many people as possible to die. But at exactly the right moment, Berkeel arrived and managed to intervene, taking the attack in place of the civilians and saving them from it. And thanks to the power of friendship, which had become stronger than ever before, she charged toward Kalarir at incredible speed, like an arrow released from a bow. At that time, the entire city was in complete chaos. Everyone was trying to fight the shadows. In his own way, whoever had a sword fought with a sword, and whoever did not have a sword grabbed a pickaxe, a shovel, a stick, or anything else they could get their hands on and joined the fight. The important thing was that no one stood around watching. Everyone was resisting the shadows with everything they had. And honestly, this scene made me think, isn't this starting to sound like a call for general mobilization and resistance against an occupation or something? And of course, Suki and Karo were not going to stand far away from the battle. The two of them jumped into the fight as well and began facing the shadows, but suddenly a major problem occurred. Yuki and Karo lost consciousness. Even though both of them were now unconscious and unable to defend themselves, the shadows did not stop attacking them. They kept coming after them, and the situation looked extremely dangerous. But at the very last moment, a wonderful surprise happened. The people of the city themselves arrived at the scene. The very people the group had been trying to protect from the beginning were now the ones who came back to save their friends. At the last possible moment, they managed to intervene, rescue Yuki and Karo from the shadows, and save them from certain death. At another point in the battle, the cat found herself in an extremely difficult situation and began facing Karo, eventually managing to knock her down. But while confronting her, Kuro kept talking about all the beautiful memories they had shared together with the food group. She kept reminding her of every wonderful moment they had spent together, every situation, every laugh, and every day that had brought them closer, almost as if she were trying to wake her up from the state that had taken control of her. They had spent a long time together, filled with joy, sadness, laughter, and tears. They had shared countless moments and had even tasted so many delicious foods together. Without even realizing it, tears began streaming from Viko's eyes. At that moment, she hugged her friend tightly, almost as if she were desperately trying to hold on to her and never let go. But despite all of that, she still felt that the path her friend had chosen had reached a point of no return, and that she had gone so far down it that turning back had become almost impossible. Then suddenly, the cat attacked Kuro. Even though Kuro had once been one of her closest and dearest friends, someone she had once considered incredibly precious. Just as the situation was about to spiral completely out of control, they suddenly heard a voice speaking. Yuna had appeared, and she began informing everyone there that the entire city had become completely covered in darkness, and that the darkness was spreading everywhere. But then she told them something extremely important. Even in the deepest darkness, there is always light. After that, she revealed an extremely dangerous truth. She told them that the person currently sitting on the city's throne was not the real princess, but only a fake princess. The true princess was still somewhere out there, trying to protect the people from afar. Those words came as a massive shock to everyone. The people of the city became nervous and confused, and no one knew who to believe or who they could trust anymore. But Kaiser did not like those words at all, so she ordered Carol to kill everyone. But for the second time, Carol refused to obey the order of her friend and mistress. She knew the order was cruel and inhuman, and she could not bring herself to kill innocent people simply because Kaiser had commanded her to. But Kaiser completely lost control of herself, almost as if she had gone insane. She used chains and some strange kind of magic, seized control of her with one hand, and began forcing her to carry out her orders against her will, while she screamed from the unbearable pain. She tried to resist, but her body would no longer obey her, and her own power was being used against her will. She reached such an extreme level of despair that she began begging anyone at all to end her life. She said she did not want her power to continue being the reason the people she loved were getting hurt. She screamed in complete emotional collapse, wishing for nothing more than to die die before she was forced to use her power to kill her friends or any other innocent person. In the end, she decided that she would no longer hide the truth about herself. In front of all the people of the city, she stood tall, raised her weapon high, and revealed her true identity. In the name of the princess, she declared that she would protect everyone. She declared that she would reclaim her kingdom and would never allow anyone to take it from her or harm her people. Kuro charged toward the battlefield at tremendous speed, like an arrow released from a bow. She began cutting down the shadows one after another. Every shadow that stood in her way was defeated because she wanted to reach Carrier as quickly as possible. But suddenly, the true opponent who had been waiting for her appeared. And this person was no stranger. It was Jan, the commander of a unit of Royal Guard Knights. That meant Kuro was now standing before an opponent stronger and far more dangerous than every shadow she had faced before. Meanwhile, in another area inside the castle, the group was moving under Meta's guidance. Their objective was to reach the room containing the body of one of the 7 kings. They knew the situation was extremely dangerous, but they continued forward because time was running out, and they needed to reach that place before the ritual began. But the moment they arrived, they were shocked to find someone waiting for them. A person appeared before them, blocked their path, and told them that they would not be allowed to achieve their goal because once the ritual began, but the one inside still had not had enough and wanted even more. She began using her magic to torture Kuro and make her suffer horribly. Kuro started screaming from the pain and could no longer endure what was happening to her. Suddenly, the ground itself began to move, and massive chains emerged from it, shooting directly toward Kuro, as though they were trying to bind her and completely prevent her from moving. At the same time, inside the castle, the Suda group was still doing everything in their power to defeat Christina. But the truth was painfully obvious. They were no match for her at all. Christina was far stronger than them and managed to defeat the entire group with ease, one after another. And after finishing them off, she still was not satisfied. She even intended to take Irko's eyes. But at that moment, Anna and Hirar, the other 2 members of the group, suddenly appeared. They entered the battle at exactly the right moment and launched a surprise attack against Christina. The attack genuinely caught her off guard and forced her to use an enormous defensive power. She relied on one of her abilities that gave her an almost absolute defense, as if no one could break through it no matter how powerful the attack was. At first, the ability seemed completely impossible to overcome, but even the strongest defense has to have a weakness. Christina's weakness was that whenever she encountered a situation beyond her ability to calculate and predict, she began having trouble dealing with what was happening. So the group exploited that weakness and managed to create a plan that made them believe they had finally succeeded in defeating Christina. But things were not that simple, because Christina also possessed an absolute offensive ability, something even Meta herself had failed to predict. So everything that had happened in the battle was still far from being the end. But the biggest surprise was that everything we had seen from the very beginning had been nothing more than an act. The entire group had been pretending to fight that way in order to distract Christina and force her to focus on them. While Christina was occupied with the battle, Irko took advantage of the opportunity and quietly began moving toward the place where one of the 7 kings was being held captive. His goal was to reach that location, free Meta, and rescue her. But before he could complete his mission, Kaiser appeared. Meanwhile, outside the castle, Kuro was still fighting with everything she had. She possessed an enormous power created by the bond of friendship she shared with her friends. That power made her feel as though nothing in the entire world could stop her. And sure enough, she eventually managed to defeat the unit commander. As for Kuro and Jan, there was now an incredibly powerful shared feeling between them, almost as if their hearts had begun beating to the same rhythm. They both shared the same goal: protect the city, protect its people, and defend their homeland no matter what happened. To them, this was not merely a mission or an order given by someone else. This was their true purpose and their real responsibility. Kuro managed to convey her goal and her emotions to Jan, and through that shared feeling, she was able to wake him up and bring him back to his senses. Jan began to understand that what was happening around him was wrong, and that things were not unfolding the way he had believed. At that moment, Kaiser realized that everything was beginning to slip out of her control, and she completely lost her composure, almost as though she had gone insane. She charged toward Kuro and began attacking her with everything she had. But before she could reach her, Jan stepped in, stood in front of Kuro, and stopped the attack. And that was when an incredibly important moment happened. Kuro and Jan stood side by side and joined forces. The two of them decided to face Kaiser together as a team in order to protect the city and its people, no matter the cost. Jan once again raised the sharp tip of his sword toward Kaiser, and with the unit commander's help, Kuro rushed toward her and began delivering powerful attacks one after another. The blows were so violent that even Kaiser herself began being forced backward. Every strike slammed into her with such force that it almost looked as though they were opening a flower across her body from the sheer intensity of the attacks. As the battle continued, the massive wall surrounding the city also began to collapse, almost as though the battle itself was breaking apart the barrier that had trapped them. In the middle of all this, Marco ran toward Caro and hugged her tightly. At that moment, Marco felt that she had finally fulfilled her promise. She had promised that she would protect Carrier no matter what happened, and now she had truly managed to save her and keep her safe. But at that exact moment, they discovered another surprise. The person who had been fighting Marco the entire time was not the real Marco at all. It turned out to be nothing more than a shadow that the monsters had transformed into that form in order to deceive them. As for the real Kaiser, she finally appeared. And from the very first moment, it was obvious that she was far stronger than anything they had faced before. So powerful, in fact, that a single snap of her fingers was enough to strike Jan, the unit commander, send him flying away, and knock him unconscious instantly. Then, at the most dangerous moment of all, she began preparing to use Kuro and Carrick as sacrifices in order to complete her plan. But just when the situation had reached the absolute peak of danger, she finally appeared, and with that powerful entrance, she arrived with such an overwhelming presence that the first thing you would think was, "What is this? Is that someone wearing a black cloak and carrying two swords or what?" This time, we are going to travel a little further back in time and see the past of the young Princess Justin, learning how she was raised from childhood so that she would one day be ready to become queen. Ever since she was little, her father and mother had taught her countless things about life, responsibility, and what it truly meant to be a princess. But out of all those lessons, there was one lesson in particular that Justin loved more than anything. She had to keep smiling no matter what happened. No matter how difficult the circumstances became, and no matter how many problems, no matter how difficult things became, and no matter how much the world closed in around her, she had to keep smiling. That was why we always saw Justin with her bright smile, like a sun rising in the middle of darkness, trying to spread happiness and joy to everyone around her. Then we return to the present, where the real battle finally began. This time, Kuro was determined to take back everything that had been stolen from her, and she would not allow Kaiser to remain in control of her kingdom any longer. She pulled herself together, gathered all her strength, and then charged toward Kaiser at full speed. She moved like a rocket flying at maximum speed and delivered an incredibly powerful direct strike. But Kaiser did not simply stand there and watch. She used the power of one of the 7 kings, the Star Queen, and quickly managed to block Kuro's attack. After stopping the blow, she prepared to counter with an even stronger attack. The strike was so powerful that Kuro had to draw out every bit of strength she had just to block it and stay on her feet. When Ichika saw what was happening, he decided to increase the power even further, using an additional level of strength to raise Biko's energy. And with the key as well, Kuro was finally able to gain better control over the source of her power, instead of allowing the power to control her. Thanks to the support she received from her friends and the strength they were sending to her, she finally gained an opportunity to move closer to Kaiser and confront her at close range. But Kaiser had been waiting for the right opportunity. She took advantage of the fact that Kuro was distracted and not paying attention, then suddenly tried to attack her from behind. Fortunately, Ichika reacted at the very last moment and managed to stop the attack before it could reach her. At that moment, Kuro decided to use every ounce of power she had. The energy erupting from her was enormous, almost as if she had released every bit of power she had stored inside herself all at once. On the other side, Kaiser unleashed her full power as well. Now there were 2 massive sources of overwhelming power facing each other, with each one pushing against the other with everything she had. For a moment, the battle looked completely deadlocked, with neither one capable of overpowering the other. Their strength was almost equal. Every strike was blocked by another strike, and every attack was met with an even stronger attack. But then, something completely different happened. The encouragement of her friends and the power of friendship began giving Kuro a new boost. Every word of encouragement, every person who had stood beside her, and every beautiful memory they had shared together gave her even more energy. It was as if the power of friendship itself had become a real source of strength. Thanks to that support, Kuro's power increased dramatically, making her stronger than she had ever been before. And even though Kaiser was still standing and had not fallen, Kuro began pressuring her more and more, but Kaiser still refused to give up. Suddenly, she summoned Meta and the Star Queen, two of the 7 kings. They appeared beside her on the battlefield and immediately began launching extremely fast attacks toward Yuki, while sharp swords flew toward them at terrifying speed. But at exactly the right moment, Korra appeared, rushed in front of the two of them, and managed to block the queen's attack, saving her 2 friends from the fatal blow. As for Kaiser, she saw what had happened as proof of one thing. She said that no matter what happened, no matter how many repeating loops and lives they went through, and no matter how many times time repeated itself, her friend always ended up choosing to betray her. But the truth was completely different, because deep inside her heart, Kaiser still held an incredibly important place, one that no one else could take and no one could ever replace. She still loved her in her own way and still saw her as someone incredibly important in her life. And all she wanted was something very simple. She wanted to sit down and eat with Kaiser. She wanted Kaiser to experience for herself that warm feeling the whole group had whenever they sat together at the same table, eating, laughing, and talking. She wanted Kaiser to understand the warmth of friendship, the feeling of people gathering around food, and those simple moments that make a person feel like they are not alone. And for one very brief moment, her sincere words truly reached Kaiser's heart. Kaiser visibly hesitated and seemed affected for a moment, almost as though those words had begun making her question the path she had chosen. But that effect did not last long. Her hesitation quickly disappeared, and Kaiser returned to her cruel self once again. She ordered Meta and the Queen to attack everyone. At the same time, Kaiser grabbed Kuro and prevented her from moving. Before attacking her, however, she stopped for a moment and asked her an extremely important question. Why? Why, even though Kaiser had taken everything from her, destroyed her life, and stolen everything she loved, did Kuro still look at her with such sadness? And why, despite everything that had happened, did she still look at her with pain and concern instead of hatred? She asked her, essentially, if you truly lost everything, and if I took everything that belonged to you, how do you still have the strength to remain determined to take it all back? How do you still have hope? And how are you still fighting without completely falling apart? Kuro's sincere words touched her heart once again and made Kaiser hesitate for one very brief moment. But in the end, that moment of hesitation was not enough. Kaiser clung to her decision and remained determined to carry out her plan to the very end. Suddenly, the ground began shaking violently, as though the entire place was about to collapse. But no one was going to allow her to do whatever she wanted. Yuki charged toward Kaiser at full speed and stood in front of her without fear. Thanks to the power of his aura, which we finally found a proper use for, his true role became clear in that moment. Because Yuki was the key, his ability was what could completely turn the tide of the battle. And sure enough, Yuki intervened at exactly the right moment and helped Meta and the Queen break free from Kaiser's control. The moment Kaiser lost the source of power she had been receiving from the 2 members of the 7 kings, her strength began noticeably weakening. She found herself in an extremely difficult position, and the balance of the battle started turning against her. But instead of surrendering, Kaiser decided to make the most dangerous and insane move imaginable. She decided to sell her soul to the devil. In other words, instead of trying to fight using her natural strength, she allowed the darkness to completely consume her soul, even if it meant losing herself forever. Honestly, this was an unbelievably reckless gamble on Kaiser's part, because that decision meant her true personality and very self would sink into the darkness, and in the end, she might disappear and be completely destroyed. But despite everything that had happened, Carrie remained nothing more than a small cat who was incredibly loyal to her friend. She truly loved Kaiser and could not stand watching her disappear right before her eyes. Her tears continued falling without stopping, and in the end, Carrie walked over and grabbed her friend's hand, almost as if she were saying without words, "I'm not leaving you alone." The entire group decided to go and save Kaiser. Because despite everything that had happened between them, Kaiser still owed the group something. She still had not eaten the meal with them that Kari had always wanted to share with her, and she still had not experienced the warmth they all wanted to share with her. At that moment, their friends began arriving from everywhere. People from different kingdoms and groups gathered together and came at exactly the right time to help them. Thanks to Han and Christina, they were able to open a path for them. The group began pushing forward and entered deep into the heart of the shadow world. Every one of them fought with everything they had, and they all shared a single objective: reach Kaiser, and save her before the darkness completely consumed her. After an enormous effort, they finally managed to reach the place where Kaiser was. But then, suddenly, disaster struck. Wiki rushed in front of Viko to take the blow in her place, and the attack hit him directly. Blood began pouring from him heavily. At the same time, the power he had been supporting began weakening little by little, as though his own energy was disappearing. When everyone around him saw his condition, they realized that he was in real danger. The sight was so painful that some of them burst into tears because they felt that they might lose one of their most important friends. Deep inside the very heart of the shadow world, Carrie finally met her friend Kaiser. The space around them was breaking apart and collapsing, with everything shattering piece by piece, but Kari was not afraid. With all the maturity and strength she had gained from everything she had been through, she decided from the depths of her heart that she had to save Kaiser from despair, no matter the cost. They had gone through endless loops. Worlds had changed. Lives had been replaced, but the world was not the only thing that had changed. Kari herself had changed. She had become stronger and more mature, and she had come to understand many things about her friend and about herself. At the same time, Kaiser's body inside the shadow world began freezing and cracking, almost as though her body itself was shattering along with her heart, which had already reached its absolute limit. But even while seeing all of this, Carrie never let go of her friend's hand. She kept holding on with all her strength. She did not care about the darkness. She did not care that the entire place was collapsing. She did not even care that Kaiser herself was pulling away from her. All that mattered was staying beside her. And at that moment, she heard a voice calling out to her, a voice reminding her that she was not alone. It was the very same feeling Kuro had experienced when she had been willing to do anything to protect her friends. And Carrie was also willing to do the impossible to protect her friend. Yuki also swore to himself that he had to protect everyone and protect the bond connecting all the members of the Food Guild. No matter what happened, he would never allow that bond to be broken. Suddenly, an incredibly bright and dazzling light began spreading everywhere. The light completely surrounded them, and in a single instant, they all returned to the real world in a breathtaking scene filled with brilliant light. At last, the endless loop was broken. After everything they had endured, every loop that had repeated, and every world and life they had experienced, they finally managed to break free from the cycle thanks to the powerful friendship connecting them. A friendship that proved stronger than all the strange and absurd laws governing this universe. In other words, no matter how unchangeable the rules were supposed to be, their bonds were stronger. In the end, they all returned once again to the home that brought them together. The home where they had experienced their best and worst moments, where they had laughed, eaten together, fought and reconciled, and created countless memories. But this time, there was one huge difference. Kur was finally able to live under her real name, without having to hide the truth about who she was, or continue living under an alias.